members that the question is that the House has considered asbestos in workplaces. Sir Stephen Timms, I think. Thank you.
The assumption in the current regulation, is that if the asbestos is in reasonable condition and it's not disturbed, it shouldn't harm anybody. But that assumption, I think, looks increasingly unsafe. We've heard from others about the extent of the problem of asbestos in schools and in hospitals, and I understand the scale of the threat is going to be highlighted in a big article in the Sunday Times magazine this coming weekend. But I'm also worried that there hasn't been enough focus on this problem over the last few years. 2019-20, Health and Safety Executive conducted 907 inspections of work by licensed asbestos inspectors. That's 40% fewer than in 2012-13. The number of asbestos enforcement notices fell by 60% in the period 2011-12, 2018-19, in a period when, of course, HSE has really struggled with resources and should have had more support than it got. But total number of HSE enforcement notices only fell by 10% in that period, so the fall on asbestos was much greater. The Minister's predecessor, the Right Honourable Member for Norwich North, told the committee that the government had, quote, a clearly stated goal that it is right to, over time and in the safest way, work towards there no longer being asbestos in non-domestic buildings. We agreed with the Minister about that, and I hope the current Minister will reaffirm that view, but we think we need a plan to achieve that goal, not just to hope that it kind of happens by happenstance. We recommended, as the House has rightly been reminded, a 40-year deadline to remove all asbestos from non-domestic buildings, a plan to achieve it, and for HSE to develop a central digital register of asbestos in non-domestic buildings. And I make this point, Mr. Paisley, we know we're going to have to do a lot of work to our buildings to deliver net zero in the next few decades. That means two things. First, asbestos left in place is not going to be left alone for long. It's going to be disturbed. And that creates potentially a big problem. But it also creates an opportunity, because while making these net zero changes that are going to have to be made, we can remove asbestos at the same time and so achieve removal relatively cost-effectively. And that's what I think we should be doing. So since the Select Committee's report, research that's been published has, I think, strengthened the case for action. We've heard about the report of the Asbestos Testing and Consultancy Association, which I'm glad is going to become an annual report. And one of the lessons from their survey is that a national central register of asbestos, as recommended by the Select Committee, is not going to involve massive new data collection. A lot of the data is already there. It needs organising and assessing. It needs quality assuring. But that is a wholly manageable task. The industry has done a large chunk of it already without any government support. With government support, the whole thing becomes a very manageable task. I welcome the programme of inspections in 400 schools that the Health and Safety Executive has been undertaking. They have made the point that a lot of schools don't have a plan for managing asbestos risk. And the Irwin Mitchell report that's been mentioned estimates that if we don't do anything, it'll take 80 years to get rid of asbestos from all local authority buildings. We really do need to get a move on. And a final point, which was made in intervention earlier, the retained EU law bill, if it reaches the statute book in its current form, there will be no UK regulations on managing asbestos for the first time since 1930. Now, I don't think anybody wants that, Mr. Paisley, and I wonder if the Minister can reassure us that there will be secondary legislation to fill that gap. Can she tell us when it's going to be published and whether it will be consulted on? But I do ask her as well to reconsider the government's response to those two crucial recommendations, a 40-year deadline and a central register.
Thank you, Sir Stephen. Mick?